In Season 7 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, investigators returned to one of the most persistent questions on the property, with a discovery that appeared to change the scale of the mystery entirely. Beneath the mesa, in an area already associated with erratic readings and repeated equipment failures, new subsurface imaging identified what looked less like a natural void and more like an access point that had been deliberately sealed. That detail mattered. If someone had intentionally closed off a tunnel below one of the ranch's most active zones, then the anomalies recorded over the years might not be isolated events at the surface at all. They might be connected to something concealed underground. What drew immediate interest was not simply the presence of an empty space beneath the rock. Underground cavities are not unusual in parts of the American West. It was the character of the obstruction itself that stood out. The density pattern appeared layered. The material looked packed rather than collapsed. In the engineering review, the blockage did not resemble a routine cave-in caused by weathering or erosion. It suggested intervention in a place where aerial irregularities, radio interference, and unexplained instrument drift had already been documented above ground. That possibility carried unusual weight. For years, data gathered near the mesa and the triangle had pointed investigators toward the same broad area. Ground-penetrating radar had repeatedly shown discontinuities below the surface. GPS devices had drifted without a clear mechanical explanation. Survey instruments had lost stability at points that did not correspond to obvious geological faults. Any one of those readings might have been dismissed as noise. Taken together and revisited beside the newly identified obstruction, they suggested a pattern that had never been fully explained. That is why the underground theory began to matter in a new way. Recent scans did not reveal a small, isolated cavity, but something more continuous, as though a passage extended inward beneath the mesa. When those images were compared with older surveys, the discrepancy was striking. Earlier data had hinted at voids, but the newer imaging suggested connection. A cavity had become a root. A root had begun to resemble a network. A review of property records added another layer. Old infrastructure notes contained gaps where references should have been more precise. A set of survey annotations appeared to acknowledge subsurface irregularities without fully describing them. In one instance, a notation suggested an area to be avoided during previous work, yet no explanation was attached. None of those records proved there were tunnels. What they did show was that questions about the underground layout of the ranch may not have begun with the current investigation. Geological consultants were cautious, but even they found certain elements difficult to dismiss. Parts of the underground pattern did not match the most likely fracture system expected in that formation. Natural voids can be irregular, branching, and unstable. Some of what the scans revealed fit that description. Other portions did not. There were stretches where the dimensions appeared unexpectedly consistent, and intervals where the direction of the passage was less chaotic than geology alone might predict. That did not prove construction. It did, however, justify a closer look. Once the decision was made to expose the entrance, the work was treated as a controlled engineering operation rather than an excavation driven by curiosity. The possibility of collapse, trapped gases, unstable rock, or hidden shafts made caution essential. As the outer material was removed, the structure of the blockage became more revealing. There was loose rock near the surface, then a compacted, clay-like layer beneath it, and beyond that, a denser section that looked deliberately reinforced. Each layer differed in composition and packing. Together they formed something more organized than debris. That distinction sharpened the central question. Was the seal intended to hold back unstable ground, to prevent entry, or to isolate something deeper inside? No immediate answer followed. Instead, the opening produced another anomaly. As the final outer barrier was breached, sensors recorded a measurable change in air pressure and temperature. Neither shift was extreme, but both were clear. The cavity beyond was not behaving like a simple dead-end pocket of air. It seemed connected to a larger volume, somewhere farther in. A second irregularity emerged almost at once. Radio communication became unstable as tools approached the exposed passage. Engineers tested for basic interference, repeated the checks, and swapped equipment. The effect persisted in close proximity to the opening. That did not establish a cause. Geology can interfere with signals, equipment can fail, yet the timing was difficult to ignore. Opening the sealed access point had changed the environment in ways the team could measure. Because the entrance was still considered unsafe for direct human descent, the first inspection moved forward robotically. A compact platform carrying lights, a camera array, and basic sensors was sent into the passage. Its initial footage seemed, at first glance, to support a natural explanation. The first section of tunnel was rough, irregular, and consistent with unmodified stone. Yet farther inside, the geometry changed. The passage narrowed into a stretch whose width and height appeared far more uniform than the opening section behind it. That transition was important. Geologists noted that natural processes can occasionally create surprisingly regular voids. Engineers countered that the consistency here deserved careful measurement. The lidar mapping confirmed that at least one segment maintained dimensions within a narrow range over a longer distance than expected. On its own, that remained an observation, not a conclusion. Still, it introduced the possibility that a natural formation had been altered, widened, or stabilized at some point in the past. Other details complicated the picture. Dust inside the tunnel was not evenly distributed. In several places, the walls showed scarring that looked like disturbance rather than untouched weathering. There were no obvious modern tool marks, no fresh footprints, and no signs of recent traffic. Whatever had happened there did not appear recent, yet the passage did not feel entirely untouched either. It carried the subtle signs of prior use, without offering any clear evidence of who had been there. Then came the first unexplained technical result. As the robotic platform entered one specific stretch, its battery levels dropped faster than expected. The team halted, recalibrated, and ran a second pass with separate equipment. The decline repeated in nearly the same area. The loss was not catastrophic, but it was concentrated. Outside that section, the systems behaved normally. Inside it, power draw changed in a way that could be documented but not immediately explained. Near that same zone, the cameras identified a side recess that appeared to have been widened after the original void had formed. It was not large enough to be described as a full chamber, but it was more than a random indentation. The walls around it differed subtly from the surrounding surfaces, and the shape suggested purposeful modification. No clear artifact was visible, no obvious installation remained. What the recess had once been used for, if anything, was uncertain. Its presence simply pushed the investigation farther from the idea of an untouched geological cavity. The first interior survey also confirmed that the newly opened tunnel could not be treated as a single, isolated passage. To understand it properly, the team broadened the effort and began mapping below the mesa with multiple methods at once. Lidar from inside the accessible section was combined with density modeling and microgravity data from above ground. The result was not a perfect picture, but it was enough to reveal multiple branching voids extending beneath the site. That was the moment the underground mystery became significantly larger. One branch appeared to angle toward areas already associated with the ranch's most persistent surface anomalies. Another extended into a region where previous instruments had behaved erratically during unrelated tests. A third seemed to terminate abruptly, though whether that was due to a collapse, a limitation in the scan, or another blockage was impossible to say at first. Even in incomplete form, the system did not resemble an ordinary single-run cavity. It looked structured, segmented, and deeper than anyone had anticipated. Specialists compared the patterns against known mine workings, lava tube formations, and natural fracture networks. None of those analogies fully fit. There were features consistent with natural formation, especially near the entrance. There were also segments whose alignment, consistency, and interruption patterns seemed atypical. Former mining experts noted something else. If the system had been used for extraction, there should have been signs of spoil placement, support remnants, transport marks, or a documentary trail. Those expected traces were either absent or far less obvious than they should have been. At that stage, the investigation turned outward in time. If the underground routes had existed in some recognizable form before the current team arrived, it was possible that earlier land users had noticed them, mapped them, or deliberately avoided them. Historical records offered no direct confession, but they did present fragments. Ranch maintenance notes from decades earlier mentioned an unstable lower access, without clarifying what that phrase referred to. A separate sketch showed a subsurface line where no approved utility trench appeared in county records. On its own, the drawing was ambiguous. Beside the new tunnel map, it became harder to dismiss. Local testimony added to that sense of prior awareness. A retired regional contractor recalled being advised that certain areas near the Mesa were not to be disturbed, even when moving equipment through them would have been practical. He offered no dramatic explanation and no claim of unusual phenomena. What made his recollection valuable was its restraint. He described instructions, not theories. Another former worker remembered references to ground that was considered wrong in a way he could not define technically. Such testimony did not prove concealment. It did suggest that the underground condition of the property may have been known, if only in fragments, for much longer than the present investigation. Even so, history did not settle the matter. It deepened it. If earlier occupants knew of underground access, why did written references stop short of describing it clearly? If a seal had been placed deliberately, was that done for safety, secrecy, or because someone before them encountered conditions they could not manage? The evidence remained incomplete, and that incompleteness forced the investigators back toward the physical record. By then, two broad interpretations had emerged. Geologists maintained that much of the system could still be natural, particularly the morphology near the entrance and the rougher transitions in the older rock. Engineers emphasized the layered seal, the dimensional consistency of interior stretches, and the widened recess as indicators of later human modification. Mining specialists rejected a conventional extraction explanation, but stopped short of endorsing anything more exotic. The most disciplined conclusion was also the most unsatisfying. No single ordinary model accounted for everything that had been documented. That was precisely why the next step mattered so much. Instead of debating origins in the abstract, the team designed a controlled field experiment aimed at a narrower question. Were the underground structures connected in any measurable way to the ranch's long-observed surface anomalies? Sensors were placed both inside the tunnel and above the mesa during the same monitoring window. Electromagnetic detectors, infrasound equipment, and tracking systems were synchronized by timestamp so that any event could be compared across locations. For much of the monitoring period, nothing unusual appeared. Then, within a brief interval, the underground instruments registered a sharp electromagnetic disturbance, accompanied by an infrasound pulse. The readings were not ambiguous in the raw data. They rose, peaked, and dropped within a clearly defined period. At nearly the same time, surface equipment above the corresponding zone recorded a brief irregularity in the airspace overhead. It was not enough to identify a conventional object. It was enough to establish that something measurable had occurred above ground during the same narrow window as the underground event. Investigators were careful not to overstate what that meant. Correlation does not prove mechanism. A shared timestamp is not an explanation. Yet among all the tests conducted up to that point, this was the strongest measurable alignment between underground activity and surface anomalies. More importantly, the underground signal appeared strongest near the branch that seemed to end at an inner obstruction deeper inside the system. That result changed the direction of the investigation once again. Attention shifted away from the now opened entrance and toward the possibility that the first seal had only ever been the outer boundary. Robotic equipment was sent farther down the narrowing branch. Beyond the accessible corridor, the passage constricted and terminated in what appeared to be another closure. This one was different, more compact, more integrated with the surrounding stone, less like a straightforward barrier of packed fill, and more like something older, harder, and deliberately established deeper within the system. A narrow probe was inserted through a natural fissure at the edge of that inner obstruction. The footage was limited, but what it revealed was enough to raise the stakes. Beyond the barrier, there appeared to be open space. Then, the beam tipped downward and found no floor within its immediate range. The cavity seemed to continue vertically, dropping below the line of sight. A later scanner pass suggested the same possibility, though it could not confirm the full depth. The system, it now seemed, did not simply continue inward. It may have continued downward. That discovery reframed everything that had come before it. If there were two seals at different depths, possibly from different periods, then the first unsealing had not resolved the central mystery at all. It had exposed a layered underground environment in which each threshold led to another. One interpretation held that a natural system had been modified over time by human hands, perhaps for access, storage, or concealment. Another held that portions of the underground structure were never fully understood by those who encountered them, and that the seals were practical responses to instability or unexplained conditions. At present, neither explanation could be confirmed. What could be stated with confidence was more modest, and perhaps more important. There is credible evidence of a real passage system beneath the mesa. At least one entrance appears to have been intentionally sealed. A deeper obstruction may exist beyond it. Measurements taken underground correspond, in time and location, with anomalies previously recorded at the surface. The tunnels are no longer a rumor attached to the mythology of the ranch. They are now part of the documented investigation. That does not tell us who sealed them. It does not tell us when the closures were made, why the inner barrier appears different from the outer one, or what lies below the vertical continuation suggested by the probe footage. It does not explain whether the anomalies are generated within the underground system, shaped by it, or simply made measurable at those points because of local geology. Those distinctions still matter, and none can be resolved honestly without more evidence. Yet the significance of this inquiry may lie precisely there. For years, attention at the ranch has been drawn upward, toward the sky, the mesa, and the airspace above the most active zones. The tunnel investigation introduced a more complicated possibility. Some of the most puzzling surface events may not begin at the surface at all. They may be linked to structures, conditions, or processes hidden beneath it. In that sense, unsealing the tunnels did not answer the question that brought investigators there. It narrowed it, refined it, and made it harder to ignore. Beneath the mesa, the team found evidence of depth, design, and interruption, signs that the underground story of Skinwalker Ranch is not incidental to the larger mystery, but central to it. And if the deepest readings are pointing toward a second barrier and a drop beyond it, then the most revealing part of the investigation may still lie below the level that has yet been reached. For now, that is where the record stands. A sealed entrance opened, a passage documented, anomalies measured, history revisited, theories tested, and a deeper threshold revealed. The mystery did not disappear under scrutiny. It became more precise, more grounded, and in some ways more difficult than before. Because once the underground roots beneath the ranch were finally unsealed, the question was no longer whether something was hidden there. The question became how far down the hidden part really goes.